the former federal prosecutor. Now he is a defense attorney in Los Angeles. And wow, David, tell us about this case with the cops using what was demonstrably, it seemed, over the top, violent takedown of this woman in this convenience store robbery, and then the hand of the federal government coming in after the conviction to try to have a place at the table as to what's going to happen to this cop.
Well, it's anomalous, and in my opinion, it shouldn't have happened. This was directly political. This was a new United States attorney picked by Trump, who came in and basically is making, very little, making a misdemeanor out of what was a felony jury finding. So the background of it is that there are two police officers, two sheriffs who show up in Palmdale. Palmdale is a kind of it's an exurb, you might want to call it that, of Los Angeles, near Lancaster, that area, very northern LA County. I raise that because it brings up the question whether this case should have been prosecuted in state court and whether in the future it will be prosecuted in state court. But it might have seemed to the DAs a little bit like charging those cops in Simi Valley. Certainly, looking at it back during the Biden administration, it certainly seemed to make more sense to bring the case in federal court, which is where it was brought. Now, of course, that means you have a downtown jury, because we only have federal trial courts in all of big Southern California, in Santa Ana, in Orange County. Not a good place for a case from Palmdale. Also out in Riverside, where it doesn't belong at all either, or downtown Los Angeles. So you get a downtown Los Angeles jury. Having said that, or you get a cross section of the Los Angeles community down in Los Angeles. But having said that, remember, the government has to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, and it did to 12 jurors who all found this sheriff, I think he is, guilty of felony civil rights violations. He and another officer show up in Palmdale. There's a report of a robbery. The other officer is not charged with having done anything wrong. The other officer, his partner, manages to handle this whole situation without any violence or any violation of anyone's civil rights. But this one officer, who's been found guilty unanimously by the jury, he gets out there. The woman is not committing a crime in his presence. He has no specific knowledge that she's somehow involved in this robbery. Maybe she is. I mean, the robber seems to be around there. This woman seems to be around there. That's about all that he knows. It's obvious that she acts in some way that displeases him, but not by hitting him. She makes no physical contact with him, Mark. She doesn't try to run away. He throws her to the ground and clearly, in my opinion, injures her, which is what the jury found. Now, Trump's new U.S. attorney comes in there, and this U.S. attorneys, I just want to stop for 1 minute because it's interesting. We put the U.S. district judges who have life tenure through a Senate confirmation hearing, but we don't do that with U.S. attorneys. If they have enough opposition from the Senate, they don't proceed. But we don't have the kind of hearings that we're used to having. You remember something on Kavanaugh or even on someone who was less controversial. We don't have those kinds of hearings. And in fact, just let me digress for 1 second, because there's a terrible choice that was made for Washington, D.C., a fellow named Ed Martin, who had no prosecutorial experience. And my old friend, Senator Adam Schiff from California, among others on the Judiciary Committee, among the Democrats, were trying to at least have a hearing because this Ed Martin seems so clearly unfit for that job. Anyway, he's just been withdrawn.
Well, so he was one of the he defended a J6, I believe, wasn't there? Were J6
That's
defendants.
his only court experience. He's never been a prosecutor, okay. State, federal, local. Wow. He's going to be made the chief prosecutor in the nation's capital. One of the, along with New York and Los Angeles. That's the premier, U.S. attorney post in America. And his only experience, and I'm not making this up, in court is representing vociferously and not in a way that most intelligent attorneys would have some of these J6 protesters. Anyway, so this one who just came on, this U.S. attorney, that as someone who does this kind of practice, I have to live with, Mark, for the next few years. But he's brought on with no Senate confirmation hearing and Senate confirmation hearings. And one of his first acts is to take a look at this case. He's only been in office for a month or so. One of his first acts is to take a look at this duly found guilty officer for federal civil rights violations and for battery on this woman.
And he pepper sprayed her twice in the face, threw her down. It was when I read the description of what happened. It's pretty, and there's video of it, David.
It's startling because without a video, it's very hard to convict any kind of police officer or sheriff, no matter what the witnesses say. But yes, you have video on top of everything else. So when he comes into office, two things happen. Number one, the defense attorney challenges the conviction and says that you should enter, you, the federal judge, a judgment of acquittal. You heard the whole case. The jury was way out of line. They didn't follow the instructions. This man was actually not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You heard and saw it all, Your Honor. You should throw the case out. And a very conservative federal judge named Stephen Wilson, who had this case, certainly not anybody who's pro-criminal defendant, I should say pro-criminal defendant unless it's a police officer, but certainly nobody would argue that he was in any way biased or prejudiced against the police. He would have been a great choice for that police officer or sheriff. But even this judge says, there's no basis for me to enter a judgment of acquittal. I sat here this whole time. She didn't strike him. She didn't resist arrest. She didn't try to run away. You didn't see her. You didn't see her participating in any crime yourself, police officers. And as I say, the other police officer who was there managed to handle the situation completely appropriately, whereas this one cop seems to have violated federal civil rights and beat and pepper sprayed this woman. So after that motion is denied, all that's left to do is to go to sentencing. Well, before they go to sentencing, this new U.S. attorney issues an edict that they're going to knock this case down to a misdemeanor, comes up with a new plea agreement. In a plea agreement, especially in federal court, they describe in some detail the factual basis of the crime that the defendant is supposed to be pleading guilty to. And this factual basis is all different from the facts that are presented to the jury. Now, he hasn't struck her, she hasn't been injured. And by making it a misdemeanor, people are saying he could continue to work as a sheriff or police officer. He could continue in law enforcement, going to other scenes of crimes and maybe doing the exact same thing. After all, it was only misdemeanor conduct. I don't know, if I were a police chief, I wouldn't hire him, but who knows, right? So the four U.S. attorneys, my old colleagues who have actually prosecuted this case, refused to sign off on the plea agreement. They say, no, we are not okay with this. We're not signing. We convicted this person in front of a jury of felony charges. We're on our way to sentencing. We're going to ask for a prison sentence because that's what's appropriate under the federal guidelines, and that's what's appropriate under the facts. No one's above the law, not Trump and not a police officer. Well, they won't sign, and it escalates, and they all resigned over the weekend. All four of them resigned from the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is a big deal because you might go out and get another great job. I mean, everybody who could get the job of being an assistant U.S. attorney in the first place, and who then has this wonderful experience of trying federal cases, is very employable. So they're all going to be employed. They're going to land on their feet. But it's obviously a big statement, Mark, that they go in there and say, I will not sign, and I'm leaving this job that I love, the U.S. Attorney's Office, rather than be your henchman or henchwoman. Well, they find a fellow, and as God would have it, I've had this attorney on a big federal case of mine. So I don't want to get into too much detail about him, but his name is Robert J. Keenan. And this Robert J. Keenan, who's been my adversary on a federal case for several years and still is, he does sign. He apparently comes onto this case. The news reporting is that he is not a member of the prosecution team at all, but he's a guy with about 20 some years in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we can all conjecture that he believes this was the right thing to do, that he's ambitious, that he doesn't want to leave the U.S. Attorney's Office and, think about, where his pension stands and his benefits stand at this point. But this Robert J. Keenan does sign off. And so his signature, along with the new United States Attorney himself, are on this paperwork. And the judge, when this whole thing blew up in Monday's LA Times, this Judge Wilson's federal district judge with life tenure like the rest of them, he orders a response from the government in a week, whether the judge has the power to do this. Now, we talked about this with the Mayor Adams case, when all of a sudden Trump comes in and decides to dismiss the Adams case. And we talked then about the fact that they could have dismissed the Adams case, so said the Department of Justice, two ways. One is with prejudice, which means it can't be brought up again. And the other way is without prejudice. And the district judge said, no, you can't do it without prejudice. You can't hold this like a sword of Damocles over the mayor of New York's head. You dismiss it with prejudice. But the reality is that since the government can dismiss a case, whether it's gone to jury trial or not, they can dismiss a case, in my judgment, at any time. And it doesn't change the fact that there is a verdict that they say, we are not going to prosecute the case anymore. And then the district judge, because of the separation of powers, they're not in the prosecuting business. They're in the judging business. So at the point that the prosecutor says, we will not prosecute. So if this Judge Wilson turns around after getting these legal briefs and says, you know what, I really cannot live with this misdemeanor disposition. I can't live with it. I can't approve it. The government, I expect, will turn right around and say, okay, then we dismiss the case in its entirety. We won't prosecute it at all.
Wow. Wow. That's extraordinary. It really is. And it's interesting because the resignations on the attorney's side, on the cop side, there are a bunch of sheriffs who sort of, circle the wagons around this guy, Kirk, the sheriff who was involved in this violation of civil rights and so adjudicated, right? And so it is a legit controversy. And it's weird how the cops just protect their own, despite the fact, as I say, there is so much evidence here, video and otherwise, that all of these things that are reported to have happened and argued to have happened by prosecutors actually did happen. And it just leaves us in a really sad place. As you say, yeah, go ahead.
Mark, if I heard that one of the things that they did to protest the sheriffs was they didn't run in this race. They run in the wrong race. And they didn't run in the race this year. Well, okay, they didn't run in the race this year. I mean, if they don't do their jobs, what's really their job description? I mean, they're insubordinate and they're subject to discipline. And the idea that the police and the sheriffs don't do their jobs. Now, they do tend to work on cases with the U.S. Attorney's Office. You have the FBI, then you have agents from DHS, then you have the IRS in, tax cases. You have several other agencies. But, the way things shake out, you do end up working as an assistant U.S. attorney with the local police and with the sheriffs. I had the first-degree murder of a postal carrier. I got the postal carrier convicted, and I worked with LAPD homicide. And that's why I was so surprised. This is before OJ. I was so surprised in OJ that, they were talking so much trash about LAPD homicide, because the ones that I worked with, they compared favorably to the best FBI agents or anybody else. But you do work with them a fair amount, but the idea that they can boycott your cases or they won't work on your cases. I mean, at the end of the day, the sheriffs have to live with the prosecutorial decisions. So I think if Harris had won the election, I think that this never would have happened. I think this was a blatantly putting your political thumb on the scale. This is part of, what did Trump say? When you guys arrest them, arrest them hard, throw them in the back, throw them hard into the back of the police van, throw them hard into the, this disrespect for our rights. The police have to, that's the great thing about our country. Every authoritarian country has the police who are not held to account. Every authoritarian fascist country has cops running wild. In our system, we have the rule of law. It applies to presidents and it applies to police officers and sheriffs.
Quickly, David, because our time is much shorter today, I wanted to ask you about the Trump administration suing Chief Justice John Roberts and the head of the Administrative Office of U.S. Courts. This is to give the White House control over the federal court system. Maybe you can explain whether this is just a headline grabber or there's really something to this.
This is worse. This is clickbait, I guess, for radical right wingers, because this is a nothing burger. This is a nothing burger. The federal courts, they mainly sit around and judge. That's the separation of power we just talked about. They judge and the executive branch prosecutes. But that doesn't mean that the federal judiciary can't have any boards or agencies. So they have this one board or agency that administers the courts. They have their budget issues. They have other things. Where should cases be assigned? All the kind of bureaucratic things that the judicial bureaucracy has to deal with. And so the way that this came to the fore is we have something called the Freedom of Information Act, so-called FOIA. And FOIA says that you can get documents from an agency, right? If it's part of the executive branch, but you cannot make a FOIA request, generally speaking, if you want records from the judicial branch or you want records from Congress. And so it's a FOIA request, which is made to this judicial office on the pretext that, well, this judicial office that everyone thinks is a judicial office. No, it's really an executive agency. And so they have to comply with our FOIA request. Chief Justice Roberts has some brilliant clerks over there, and some brilliant clerk wrote back and explained what I just said more eloquently than I did, and said, no, we are not turning over any documents because we are not an executive agency. We are a judicial agency. Deal with it.
And likewise, control over the federal courts shouldn't be something that the administration, that's what they want, right? They want control over the federal courts.
That's Hungary. That's Hungary.
That's right.
Make America Hungarian for the first time. No. This is just absolutely, this is really frivolous. If they file this case in federal court, I think this will be found to be frivolous litigation.
Now, quickly to the other SCOTUS decision, the Supreme Court allowing Donald Trump to ban transgender people from the military. It's a pretty big decision, David.
It's a huge decision. It's the so-called shadow docket. So a judge, I think in the Bay Area, maybe, or Washington State, got this case. The named plaintiff couldn't be more out of central casting for the plaintiffs. He or she, I forget which way the pilot transitioned, but it's a pilot with 20 years experience that we taxpayers paid $20 million for his or her training, their training.
Emily, Commander Emily Schilling is her name. Yeah.
So Commander Schilling, we paid $20 million for the training of this person. This person has served honorably, no dings on their record. And it's also brought on behalf of 7 or 8 other officers. Now, you can expect that there might be 2 situations. One is the people who actually are in the service, and the other would be for people applying to be in the service. Apparently, when Trump tried to do this the first term, Mark, it applied to people who were just applying. And if you were applying and you were trans, there were all these roadblocks or just complete barriers put in your way. But it didn't apply to people like this commander. Now they've gone even further. Trump 2.0, they've taken the position that not only should you not be serving our nation and our armed forces if you're trans, but if you're trans, get out. You're fired. You know, what would Trump say? You're fired. Yeah. You're trans. And the position is extreme. The district judge said, no. During the pendency of the litigation, we're going to allow the people who are in the service, who are trans, to stay in the service. The Ninth Circuit refused to disturb that. The Trump administration ran to the U.S. Supreme Court, and 6-3, they dissolved that injunction. So that means that for the couple of years that the litigation may last before it's finally decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, they can kick trans people out of the service, and they're going to kick hundreds of people who are serving honorably and well in the service out of the service. It's just astonishing. And of course, the three moderates to liberals dissented, but that's the way it is. The injunction's dissolved, and they're going to start kicking service members out of the service if they're trans.
I mean, to me, it's just it's an abomination. I mean, if these people are not performing, then you can get rid of them. But otherwise,
they don't have any of that, Mark. They don't have any of that. It's just all because you're trans. It's nothing based on your performance. They had plaintiffs who had excellent, unblemished performance records in the service.
There's a lot around this Abrego Garcia case. There are news organizations trying to get court records to be unsealed. The state secrets privilege is being invoked by the Trump administration in the Abrego Garcia case, so they can avoid handing over the documents in this legal battle that they've admitted involved someone that was deported illegally. And it kind of dovetails with something else, because there's a Libya strand to all of this, because a judge warned the administration that you can't start deporting people to Libya because it violates prior court orders stopping you from these deportations without due process. Can you bring this all together for us?
Sure. You know, I said that I thought Trump and his administration was going to get some sense on this issue, and people kind of chuckled because it was like, well, they haven't gotten sense on so many issues. They have it on tariffs. They have it on, a dozen things, 2 dozen things we can name. But I thought they were going to get some sense on this issue. And I think they are getting some sense. In other words, I don't think that we're going to see a plane take off for Libya, because this judge made it very clear that, picking these worst hellholes around the world and sending people who aren't even from there to those places is, you just said an abomination about something else. This is not American values. This is not what we stand for. We've never done anything like this. I think even in wartime, we didn't do stuff like that. You can say we had the renditions, but the renditions under W and Cheney, they had a certain goal, which I don't share, but there was a certain goal to them. This is nothing but cruelty and horror for nothing but cruelty and horror's sake. Obviously, Trump would tell you, I've scared those people. They don't want to come here right now. They know they hang around for a while and they get deported, and they don't go back home, with a pina colada. They go to Libya where they're tortured. But that is never what America stood for. And I just don't think that he's going to ultimately push that. I don't see the new flights, going to El Salvador. Maybe that's happened. I haven't been watching. Turning to Abrego Garcia, it's difficult for these federal judges. I mean, the rubber hits the road, Mark. They have life tenure. They have tremendous protection. They have the U.S. Marshals Service to make sure nothing happens to them. But the hardest one is to stand up to a really willful president. And that's what they're faced with, these district judges, having to stand up to a really willful president. So I think that it's sort of having these documents at least be filed in camera. We're going to be sure, I think, that the judges are going to get it right. It will be exposed one day, and not that far down the road, it will be exposed what's in those secret pleadings. Maybe it makes it a little easier for Trump and the administration to back down, that, it's not being splattered across the front page every day. But yes, these things that ought to be transparent, they ought to be out in the open. Federal court is public, except that there's some compelling reason to keep it in camera, to keep it secret. But a lot of this litigation is now going in chambers, in camera, secret. But it'll come out soon enough, and maybe some common sense will prevail. These judges are going to lower the boom on some of these administration officials. They will be held in contempt. And we've talked about the fact that Trump could ultimately give those people a pardon from criminal contempt. But wow, Trump is not willing to fight every fight. He's not willing to lose popularity after popularity. Right now, he thinks he's on pretty strong ground because he can call Abrego Garcia a wife beater. But I think that's running kind of thin. And people are saying, you know what? Maybe he's a wife beater, maybe he isn't, but a judge ordered that he could stay here and you violated the order. Maybe some of these people aren't nice people, but you know what? There's a lot of nice people in the criminal, there are a lot of not nice people in the deportation system, in the criminal justice system, but we give them due process.
Sure.
The average person, you walk into a bar and say, should a guy get due process? They say, yeah, you can't just take a guy and throw him in jail. He gets a trial, deportation, he gets a hearing, maybe in front of a judge, but he gets something. He doesn't just get thrown onto a plane against the judge's order or without a hearing that's contemplated to be held. So
sadly, we're aware of more of the specifics, I think, than the average guy. You walk into a bar and ask about it, and I think that the immigration thing is still a net win for Trump. That's what worries me. And as I've said before in this show, and I'll say it again, Abrego Garcia is not coming back under no circumstances. Trump will not allow it. He is going to big time and Bigfoot the SCOTUS decision or any other decision. That guy is not coming back. If they have to kill him, they're in wherever he is now, El Salvador. He's not at the max prison, but he's in another prison. They'll do it because he's become a cause celeb, and Trump doesn't want to have the mistake of having deported him revisited upon him for all the reasons that you said. Like, I don't think Trump's willing to do this. I don't think Trump's willing to do that. He's not willing to see the gaggle of media that will surround that Garcia returning to this country to remind everyone that Trump made a mistake. The administration made a mistake when they deported him. That's my opinion. It may be wrong. I hope it's wrong. The guy does deserve his day in court and due process, but that's what I think. I have to move to DOGE, and this is the last thing because this is huge also to me, David, and I think you'll agree. The Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court to clear the way for DOGE, Elon Musk and crew, to get into the Social Security systems that contain the personal data of millions of Americans. I mean, this is a Supreme Court plea, and I'm wondering how you think it's going to go down.
Well, my Katz record on the Mark Thompson show is pretty amazing, and you can't. It's no streak. Even Pete Rose, after 44 games, right, struck out the next game or didn't get a hit the next game. That's all streaks end. All streaks end. So maybe my streak will end on this prediction. I think the Supreme Court will rein in Musk and will rein in DOGE's access to Social Security and other computers. This is a whole level of risk. I mean, just think of what the possible scenarios are, that he's basically, he and his minions have got, a perfect mirror of what's in government computers, that he knows everything about you, me, and U.S. Supreme Court justices and anybody else that you can think of. He knows everything that should be kept confidential. He knows our health records. He knows how much money we made 15 years ago. He knows what tax exemptions we took. They know who's legally and illegally in the country. They have all kinds of other personal records in there. I just don't think the Supreme Court will stand for it. I think you have 3 votes who think it's an outrage, and then you'll have some of the 6 who think, you know what, that libertarian thing, that thing of rein in the government a little bit, do we really want this much dissemination of personal information? And what's the upside? They're not voting against Trump. They'll feel like they're voting against Musk. And, Musk is what? Back with his car company, Mark. I don't think Tesla can be saved anymore. You've dumped your Tesla. All right-thinking people have dumped their Teslas or let their leases go back. I think that was always an incredibly foolish economic move, whatever it was, by Musk. I mean,
the guy should get back to engineering. It was what he did with the Tesla network of charging really transformed electric vehicles. It was a great asset. I mean, I try to give the devil his due on that, but he is out of control. He is reckless. I think he is a pernicious force in America right now and in the world. And it's scary.
Who was buying his cars in America? People who cared about the environment, people who were, for lack of a better word, moderate to liberal, who were green. He did everything. This was I always said he must have gone short on Tesla. We're going to find out somewhere that he went short on Tesla, because everything he did was so designed to destroy the value of that company that he didn't see that coming. So we're going to find out.
I don't know if he's gone short on him. I mean, he was on the White House lawn pitching him.
Has the last laugh. Can you go that short?
He was pitching him like Cal Worthington on the White House lawn.
There's no inspectors general. He's handicapped the SEC so much. It'll be the insider trade of all time, and he'll plan to get away with it. Stay tuned.
Just give me the truth tells me Musk is not an engineer. Okay, well, whatever. He should get back to whatever if he's not an engineer. David, thank you so much. Love our time together, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. You're everywhere, man. You're on Fox News Channel. You're on News Nation. You're everywhere. So please.
Well, I like the news, Mark. I like the News Nation one because they do let me say my piece on that. I'm usually up against somebody who leans right. I lean moderate to left. And we have a really good discourse, and they let it happen. It wasn't like when I was on Fox with Laura Ingraham back in the day when she cut me off and made snarky remarks. They let me have my say, and it's usually a good interchange. It's on the weekends, usually Saturday, Sunday, around in the middle of the afternoon. News Nation.
David Katz, thanks, my friend.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.